All right, so we reached the end of the book. We reached the end of Jacob's life, and he pulls all of his sons, 12 sons, together, and assuming one room, one area, to pronounce these blessings, or more accurately, probably prophecies about the future of their namesake, the tribes that would follow after their names. But before we get into that, I want to just take a few minutes and reflect back on the whole book. What are some things that you guys learned this study that you hadn't really thought about or known before, or was was interesting to study about? And if nobody says anything, I'll just know that we didn't do a good job. Anybody? Yeah, me too. I really forgot, not forgot, I guess, but overlooked, more maybe better, the long suffering of God with the patience that He has with, obviously, through the flaws of these people, and I'm just as flawed as any of them in my own ways. And God saw the big picture, used them accordingly, and was long suffering and patient with them, and they grew along the way. And through this whole study, that to me has kind of been the overarching thing I learned. One second, Bill. Gene. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Bill. Yeah, and let's see, was it who taught class the other night? Lewis taught class the other night. He was talking about that sin all boils down to two things. What was it again? Lust and greed. And if you take these Abraham, all these patriarchs, their sins all boil down to those again in self-centeredness. So when we were looking about the story when Esau lost his blessing and all four of them just out for themselves inside of one family, that was, it was saddening to me that lots of families live that way, and we're not supposed to live that way. We need to learn the lessons from these people that God brought out in His Word. So as we reach the end of Jacob's life, he calls all 12 of his sons together. Thankfully, he's got Joseph back, and he's got him here as well. Um, for any of you guys that have siblings, would you like it if at the end of your life your dad called you and your siblings all together and said, "Okay, let's take a look at your life. Let's reflect back over your life in front of everybody." That'd be kind of embarrassing, especially for with some of the firstborn, especially. Here he gets right out of the gate talking about Reuben and that he had defiled his father's bed. It says, "Reuben, you're my firstborn. You might be the beginning of my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of my dignity and the excellency of my power. Unstable as water, you should not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch." So he loses his birthright gets divided. And I never thought about this before, but what is really important about Reuben losing his birthright? Yes, exactly. That's what I was getting at. So if he would have kept his birthright, what would have kind of happened as before? The other brothers would have kind of fallen in line under him, right? But no, he loses his birthright, so that it's dispersed among the 12 of them. Correct. So you have no God's oversight. All 12 of these tribes that are developing, no one's over each other. kind of like our churches, right? We're all autonomous to each other. And I'd never really thought about that Reuben losing his birthright created, through God's foresight, that situation for the developing tribes. Um, yeah, exactly. And it makes you think about the verse in Matthew chapter 19 and 30 that says just the example of how the first could become the last. His behavior cost him his birthright, but his behavior was also, in God's overview, what set up these 12 tribes. So next you have Simeon and Levi, brothers. What is their uh, blessing prophecy? Oh, before I get into that, one interesting thing. I believe somebody may be wrong, but this is maybe the first place in the whole Bible that kind of prophecies are spoken like ad lib at the consciously. There's the prophecies to Abraham, and they're all in visions, but I could be wrong. But it was interesting that one of the commentators said that he's here giving these blessings consciously, the prophecies of the future, what these tribes are. So something to think about if you want to study into that tomorrow. So you get into let's see, the two brothers. What was their what did he have against them than their actions? I don't know that they almost were. I I think they might have been. Yeah, I mean, they took the revenge of their sister to an extreme, to say the least, which leads to their behavior is just out of control. Like they just did whatever they felt like doing, and it says that they were instruments of cruelty, and that their anger. But all what this boils down to is that their anger, their self-willed anger, um, they wiped out all the men of Shechem in retaliation for the rape of their sister. Were all those men guilty of the rape of Dinah? No. Who knows how many, but not all of them. And Jacob really doesn't seem to do anything about it at this point. It just kind of rolls on with the rest of the story. But Jacob obviously remembers, and God remembers, because at this point it's brought up in this blessing. I keep calling them blessings, but you have to keep in mind they're not necessarily blessings. They're kind of more prophecies of the future. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. Their anger was their sin because it was rooted in self-will. The Bible speaks about godly anger in Ephesians chapter 4, be angry and do not sin, but it also speaks about ungodly anger in Ephesians 4:31, bitterness, wrath, and anger to be put away from us. So there's a difference, and these guys didn't either care or understand the difference and took this to a level that caused them to be in this situation with their blessing from their father. Simeon, it says that, it says it will divide them and Jacob will scatter them in Israel, talking about Simeon and Levi. The tribe of Simeon became small during the wilderness wanderings. They started out from Egypt as the third largest tribe in Numbers 123, but about 35 years later, in the second census of Israel, about 63% of them were gone, and they were the smallest tribe. So that prophecy came true in Numbers 26:14, and that they were divided and scattered them. But this ends up being a curse for Simeon, but a blessing for Levi. Because of the faithfulness during the rebellion of the golden calf, the Levites, it says in Exodus 32, the scattering as a blessing was throughout, for the Levite tribe, was a blessing. They received no tract of land, but their inheritance wasn't land, but they served the Lord. All right, so next we get to Judah. When you get to, let's see, in Revelations 5:5. What is Jesus called? The Lion of the tribe of Judah. If you read about Judah, do you think that I think about somebody horrible in history, like if you were from their family, like Brian from the tribe of Hitler. You know what I mean? Like, not to say that Judah was that bad, but his character wasn't this stunning, stellar character to be called like that. Somebody in the future like would end up being called the Lion of Judah. It's only about the tribe because Judah himself wasn't that great of a character, along with his other brothers. It says, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down. He lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine, and the donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. So Judah's character, although it's not necessarily brought out per se in this segment here, what was his character like from what we learned about him previously? Rose, go ahead. Yeah, Lewis, you. Yeah, and I was gonna get around about to get to that. That he just seems to be the first one of them to start to develop some character, and and that's followed through in this as well. But to Rose's point, um, he's the one in Genesis 37 that he suggested that they gain at least let's get a profit from getting rid of him. I mean, if we're going to do this, let's not just we'll get some profit out of it, and then the whole thing that how he ends up being with a prostitute to begin with speaks to his character, but he develops over time, and I think that you see that what I was talking about the long suffering, you see that through these brothers as a whole picture of the long suffering for how we develop through our different struggles and sins. Zebulon shall dwell by the haven of the sea. So there's not much here about Zebulon other than Jacob does skip the birth order of speaking through now, um, moving from the 10th to the ninth born, but keeping his focus in line with the son or Leah as the mother. So the tribe of Zebulun was noted for its faithfulness to David in 1 Chronicles chapter 12. Let's see, it says that of Zebulun there were 50,000 who went out to battle, expert in war, with all weapons of war, stout-hearted men who could keep ranks. And that they will become a haven for ships. They ended up settling in the land of sea area sitting between the Mediterranean Sea and the Sea of Galilee. So they were familiar with naval things and ships. Issachar. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between two burdens. He saw that rest was good and that the land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden and became a band of slaves. They were a large tribe. According to Numbers 26, they were the third in size. But what can you kind of infer from that prophecy about what they were like? Yeah, they were just seemed to be kind of lazy, and they ended up being servants, slaves. Um, they ended up becoming, oops, sorry. Yeah, slaves. They became slaves in their from their large standing as the third tribe. Dan shall become a judge over his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. All of these prophecies seem kind of weird. Like when I mean, why would you speak to your child like this? Why wouldn't you just be straightforward and say, okay, this is what's going to happen in your future, and saying that you're going to be a serpent by the way that bites horses' heels? I mean, it's like they got to figure out what he's talking about first off to begin with. So what's that require of all of them? Some real reflection on their behavior over their whole life, and what the consequences of their behavior is ending up for themselves and for the future. So is there things that I can do in this life that Braden will pay for? Absolutely. And that's a lot to think about, because I'm sure that he's going to bear some of the consequences of my poor choices already. But, you know, each of us have choices to make, and when we make those choices, um, a fellow we used to go to church with used to say, we're all one choice away from being on the front page of the newspaper. And I was like, whoa, that's really true. Like, one choice away from being on the front page of the newspaper, which can have consequences through generations. And I think that's bore out in these judgments as well. I'm kind of going on. Yeah, Gerald. Yeah, I do too. But I think I agree. But I think that in that causes them. Why is my father saying this about me? Some obviously some reflection. Gene. Yeah, so Dan ends up being a tribe that brings idolatry into Israel in Judges chapter 18. Jeroboam set up one of his adulterous golden calves in Dan in First King, and it later ends up becoming a central idol worship in the book of Amos. So Dan is left out of the listing of the tribes regarding the 144,000 in Revelations, but Dan's the first tribe listed in Ezekiel's millennial roll call. I don't know that that means anything, but it's just mentioned a few other times. So you get to Gad. Gad's a troop. It says Gad, a troop shall tramp upon him, but he shall triumph at last. Not much again about him, except in First Chronicles chapter 12 and 14 says the tribe of Gad supplied many fine troops for the later king of Israel. So some of these you get a little bit. Some again you get Asher, not much about him. Bread from Asher shall be rich, and he shall yield royal dainties. And then in Deuteronomy 32, Moses again took up his prophecy regarding Asher. Asher is most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. Naphtali, only 2 lines about him, is a deer let loose, and he has beautiful words. And in Matthew chapter 4, when Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, you would never think about Naphtali in this verse being put together, but it says that Jesus departed to Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, he went and dwelt in Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled which is spoken by Isaiah the prophet, that the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who sat in the region and shadow of death, a light has dawned. So where was Naphtali's land located, according to this verse? Across the Jordan, right? They were separated from the rest of the tribe. So they weren't tribes. So they weren't, again, not much about him. But now you get to Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well, a fruitful bow by a well. His branches run over the well. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him. But his bow remained in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father, and who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast of the womb. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills, they shall be the head of Joseph, and on the crown of him of the head, and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. So he's to be a fruitful bow. What is a bow? I called it a bow a second ago. I guess you'd call it bow. Bow. Yeah, it's to be fruitful. Yeah, so when we get to the end of chapter 5, hopefully we'll get through it all today. But what is the line that Joseph says that God did? Why this all came about when his brothers think that he's going to come after him? That God saw the overall picture and put Joseph in this place for a reason. He was fruitful this whole time, even through adversity. God had a plan for him to be fruitful and to spare life through his life and what he endured. Anybody have any other comments? Yeah. Yeah, they did, and each of us do. I remember at Florida College, I took a marriage and family class, I think it was called, and Brent Hunter was teaching. Anyway, I don't know why I had never thought about this before, but I got to college and realized that I don't have to do everything like my mom and dad did. I can live my life. He said that I'm free to make the choices and parent and live my life however I want to do, and whatever mistakes they make, I can make it a point not to make them. To Gerald's point, that I have a free will choice. Does that mean that it's gonna be easy? I mean, there's some things that are just ingrained through a family bloodline that I see in my son, that I see in my dad, that runs right through me. Some people, I don't know why, say that we're really stubborn, and all three of us. So, is that something that I have to be aware of and try to battle against? Yeah, but Gerald seems to be right. This seems to be something their father is putting out there, but they are developing character, but I don't know that they're even really have a whole lot to say about what this all means now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, not only look there, but think about he rode that boat entirely on his own in a pagan society. We may live in a rough society, but am I rowing alone? Thankfully not. And hopefully you guys feel the same way about myself and my family, that we're all in this together. But when you think about what Joseph endured, that'd be rough. Yeah, Todd. Mm-mm. Yes, exactly. And that character in Joseph represents our Father in what way? When we sin, what does he say that when we repent of it, that he'll remember it no more? I love the verse in Micah. I can't think of the thing where it's exactly that, but where it says that he'll cast it into the depths of the sea, our sin. You know, that once we confess it and repent, it's gone as far as he's concerned. And Joseph enacted that here by not running to his father and saying, look, this is what they really did to me all these years ago. He could have, but he didn't. Even at the end, if we don't get all the way to chapter 5, when his brother, after his father dies, and his brothers start developing this fear, oh, okay, now that we don't have this protect the shield around us, he may change his mind and come after us. And he still proves his character to be the character of loyalty and love to his brothers. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And he also was put in a position by God to have the authority to execute judgment on them and not be doing it out of any, so he could legally do it. Yes. would absolutely say that he did. I mean, yeah, yeah. That's a great point. Yes. Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. That I wonder if he would have previously known, if that would have changed the severity even more on them in this behalf. Yeah, right, right. Yeah. But I think it also, like Todd said, totally speaks to Joseph's character that in Joseph's mind that this was gone long ago. His brothers still carried the guilt because they were scared for their lives even after their father was dead. But Joseph had buried it long ago. Any other comments? All right, so the last son, we get to Benjamin. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Um, just a tribe with a reputation of fierceness. If you look in Judges chapter 3, you see the extent of this through Ehud and in Saul and in Paul. The cruelty of the tribe in general was seen in Judges 19 and 20. And then Jacob kind of wraps it up with the conclusion of the blessings of his sons. Each son had their own path, and I don't really like the word destiny, but their own path to follow. And to Mike's point, what Jacob's role in raising them up again speaks to the patience and the long suffering of God. That he probably had some. Abraham had failures, Isaac had failures as a father, but each of them seemed to get a little bit stronger and more dependent on God as they come along, and then you get someone like Joseph. And when Brad was making his comment, I was sitting here thinking about all the characters in the Bible that we look up to, David and all these. They all have at least one story of a flaw, a character flaw, like a sinfulness. And I couldn't think of one, not one. Again, more kind of a foreshadowing of Christ. Not to say that Joseph didn't sin along the way, but there's nothing recorded, not one story of him going through multiple different temptations and struggles, denying or sinning against God. You kind of have to, well, you know that he did because Jesus said he was the only sinless Son of God. Any other points before we get to chapter 50? Yes, Rose. Right. Any other comments? Thoughts? All right, so he kind of wraps it up here, and then Jacob says to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, and the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is there were purchased from the sons of Heth. Where's Larry at? Larry, have you been have you been to this place? I'm Oh, right. So they, I don't know what percentage of accuracy that this is. Would you say that it is the place, Larry? More than likely, they know exactly where this place is. You can go there, and the tomb of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he's taken and moved there from Egypt um, to be buried there. That in the tomb that Abraham bought. And it says that he breathed his last. It said Jacob did not yield up the ghost until he had delivered the last sentence of admonition and benediction to his 12 sons. He was uh, immoral till he was mortal till his work was done. So long as God had another sentence to speak by him, he spoke it. So that was a quote by Spurgeon. Sorry, I just kind of was reading there. So he yields up his ghost and gives up his life and is moved back to this cave. So we get to Genesis chapter 50, and it says, Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him, and Joseph commanded his servants and the physicians to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for him, for such are the days required for those who are embalmed, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. I don't have an answer to this, but I do have a question if we have a few minutes left. Why does it interchange between Jacob sometimes and Israel in the wording of how it's, even in this verse? It says, Then Joseph fell on his father. I guess it's referring to his personal relationship with his father when it says Jacob. But then it says, the physicians embalmed Israel. Anybody have any idea? And it does it in multiple places in this where it just switches back and forth. Any idea? Right. Yeah, I was just kind of curious if anybody knew why when it's being written why he chooses Jacob, why he chooses Israel someplace. Oh, I didn't know that. All right, cool. All right, so we got a couple minutes left here. The Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. So he was out in the land of Goshen, separated from the Egyptians, right? For the most part, when he got to the land of Egypt. But his character and Joseph's character, to Mike's point, Joseph's character was an obvious reflection of what his father had given him. And even in this last voice, it says that his father had given, when he had finished giving him, or kind of the idea that he'd given them admonitions and benedictions to them. He was respected enough where they mourned for him 70 days. That could have just been their tradition for anybody, but I don't know. That seems like a lot. It seems like a lot that he was a respected man, that this was the father of Joseph that spared Egypt. Yeah, I believe so. And we touched on this a little bit, but there's a little little bit of controversy, not controversy, but discrepancy about which pharaoh Joseph may have served under. It boils down to about two possibly, which is pretty good. But I think it's interesting that this verse bears out the fact that it says earlier that he was second in command only to Pharaoh. What's he have to do here to take his father out? He's got to get Pharaoh's permission still. I mean, just that to me, that's the simple wording of that just bears back the accuracy that these line up exactly with the position that he had. So I did quite a bit of research about Joseph and these two pharaohs, and when we were talking about last time about the acquisition of all the land being acquired back to the pharaoh's possession, that lines up perfectly with these two pharaohs. That before that, Egypt was essentially owned by the overseen by a government, a pharaoh, but the land was kind of owned by the people. But when the famine came, they bought up all the land and essentially shifted all the power back to the pharaoh and to the government from that point forward, which just is an interesting side note. So Joseph asked for permission to take Jacob back to Canaan to bury him. And then after he's buried, we already briefly talked about what's his brother's immediate fear. Here it comes. Here it comes. And so they knew, bearing that guilt all these years, that they knew they were going to have be accountable for it at some point. Just like us. We can hide it till the day we die, but we're not going to hide accountability. And they're so scared, they bring it up. And what's Joseph say? Yeah. Yes, and that's in it. And if that's a weird way to, how does he say that, Rose, again? Yeah, I was. Yeah, that's right. So God meant it for good. Am I in the place of God? I mean, his attitude and behavior was just he knew why he was there. He had a purpose, and he fulfilled it with love, as God had commanded him to do. Uh, right. Yes. All right. Great study. I appreciate everybody participating as much as you did. Thank you.